Lieutenant Marcus Webb was alone when humanity's future changed forever. He sat in front of 6 glowing screens in the Deep Space Monitoring Station, buried under the Nevada desert. It was 3 in the morning. His coffee had gone cold hours ago. The night shift was always quiet. Nothing ever happened. For 11 years, Marcus had listened to the silence of space and heard nothing but static and distant stars. Then the signal came dotted first. He thought it was equipment failure. The pattern was too clean, too perfect. Numbers repeated in sequences that made his heart stop. Prime numbers. Mathematical constants. This was not natural. This was not random. This was a message. Marcus reached for his phone to call his supervisor. Before he could dial, the signal stopped. The screens returned to their normal, empty static. He stared at the recording he had captured, his hands shaking. Someone was out there. Someone had spoken. 3 days later, they arrived. General Daniel Cole stood in Arlington National Cemetery, watching his daughter's coffin lower into the ground. She had been 32 years old. Cancer had taken her in 8 months. His wife had died 6 years before. Now he had no one left. The military had been his family for 40 years, and it had given him everything except the time to be with the people he loved. The priest spoke words that Cole did not hear. He stared at the gray sky and felt nothing but emptiness. Then the sky turned orange. Cole looked up and saw fire falling from the heavens. Streaks of burning debris cut across the clouds. In the distance, a sound like thunder rolled across the land. But it was not thunder. It was the sound of things dying in orbit. The International Space Station. The lunar habitats. 18,000 people burning to ash in 7 minutes. Around him, people screamed and ran. Cole did not move. He watched the destruction with calm eyes. He had seen death before. He had caused death before. But this was different. This was not war between nations. This was something else entirely. His phone rang. He answered it. "General Cole," said the voice on the other end. "We need you, now." The Vethrani had not come to talk. They had come to take. Their fleet appeared above Earth without warning. 400 warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They were beautiful in a terrible way, curved and silver, glowing with energy that human science could not explain. They had crossed the stars, while humanity was still learning to walk on the moon. The first attack destroyed every human asset in orbit. The second attack hit military bases across every continent. The third attack was a message, broadcast in every language on Earth. You are now subjects of the Vethrani Dominion. You will surrender all weapons. You will present your leaders for judgment. You will comply. You have 72 hours. Resistance will result in extinction. The message played on every screen, every radio, every device that could receive a signal. The world heard it together. And the world broke. In some cities, people rioted. In others, they prayed. Governments collapsed within hours. Some leaders fled to bunkers. Others killed themselves rather than face what was coming. The President of the United States suffered a heart attack and died in the White House. 3 nations launched nuclear weapons at the alien fleet. The missiles vanished before they came close, swallowed by shields that glowed briefly and then faded. The Vethrani did not even respond. Humanity was not worth a response. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, a bunker that had been built to survive nuclear war now held the last functioning command structure on Earth. Admiral Kevin Price, a man who had spent his career preparing for wars that never came, sat at a table surrounded by generals and politicians who had no idea what to do. "We should surrender," said the Secretary of Defense. His hands were shaking. "We cannot fight this. Look at what they did to our missiles. Look at what they did to our stations. We have nothing. Surrender means slavery, said a general from China. Or worse. And fighting means death, the secretary shot back. At least slaves are alive. The argument continued for hours. No one had answers. No one had hope. They were children facing a storm, and they had no shelter. Then General Daniel Cole walked into the room. He was still wearing the suit from his daughter's funeral. There was ash in his gray hair from the debris that had fallen from the sky. He moved slowly, like a man carrying a weight that no one else could see. But his eyes were clear. His eyes were focused. Admiral Price stood up. "Daniel, thank you for coming." Cole nodded. He looked around the room at the frightened faces, the trembling hands, the tears that some were trying to hide. He had seen this before. He had seen men break under pressure. He had also seen men rise. "Tell me everything," he said. For the next 4 hours, Cole listened. He studied the footage of the alien fleet. He read the reports of their weapons. He examined their shield technology and their communication patterns. He asked questions that no one had thought to ask. He took notes in a small book that he carried everywhere. When he was finished, Admiral Price asked the question that everyone was afraid to voice. "Can we win?" Cole was silent for a long moment. He closed his notebook. He looked at the Admiral, then at the others in the room. Politicians, generals, scientists, all of them waiting for an answer that would decide the fate of 8 billion people. "They made a mistake," Cole said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. "They hit Earth first. They hit us without warning, without mercy, without understanding what we are." He stood up and walked to the main screen, where the image of the alien fleet still floated above the planet he had sworn to protect. "I have studied war my entire life. I have fought enemies who had more soldiers, more weapons, more resources. And I learned one thing that never changes. Victory does not go to the strongest. Victory goes to the one who refuses to stop fighting." He turned to face them. "They expect us to surrender. They expect us to break. That is what every species they have conquered has done. They have never faced an enemy who chose death over submission. They have never faced an enemy who would burn their own cities rather than let them fall into enemy hands. They have never faced humans." Admiral Price leaned forward. "What are you proposing?" Cole smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a man who had lost everything and had nothing left to fear. "I am proposing that we make them regret the day they found our planet. I am proposing that we teach them what it means to fight a species that does not know how to quit. I am proposing that we make this war so painful, so expensive, and so endless that their grandchildren will tell stories about the mistake their ancestors made when they came to Earth." He looked at the screen one last time. They hit Earth first. That was their choice. What follows will be mine. And I promise you this, when this war ends, they will not be the ones standing. The room was silent. Then Admiral Price nodded slowly. "Tell us what you need, General." Cole opened his notebook again. "Everything," he said. "And time. Give me time, and I will give you victory. Or I will give you the most expensive defeat in the history of the galaxy." The 72 hours were ticking away. The aliens waited above. And deep in a bunker beneath the mountains, an old general began to plan the end of an empire that had stood for 2,000 years. The Vethrani had conquered 300 worlds. They had never lost a war. They were about to learn why that record was meaningless against humanity. The 72 hours passed. Humanity did not surrender. High Overseer Calith stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the deadline expire with mild curiosity. In 2,000 years of conquest, no species had ever refused the Dominion's offer. Some had fought briefly, a day or two of resistance before their spirits broke. But outright refusal? This was new. "Begin the landings," he ordered. "Pacify the major population centers." Standard protocol. His officers obeyed without question. They had done this hundreds of times before. Land the troops. Crush resistance. Install control systems. Move to the next world. It was routine. It was simple. It was the last simple thing the Vethrani would ever experience. The first landing. Forces touched down in 12 locations across Earth. Each force contained 10,000 Vethrani soldiers equipped with weapons that could level buildings and armor that could stop any bullet humanity had ever made. They marched into the cities expecting fear. They expected surrender. They expected what every other species had given them. What they found was silence. The cities were empty. Not destroyed, not burning, just empty. Billions of humans had vanished into the countryside, into the mountains, into tunnels and basements and hidden places that no orbital scan could find. General Cole's scattered ember doctrine had worked. Humanity had become smoke. Commander Varath led his battalion into the ruins of Chicago. His soldiers moved carefully through streets that should have been full of terrified civilians. Instead, they found nothing. No one. Just wind and empty buildings and the distant sound of something they could not identify. "Where are they?" asked one of his lieutenants. Varath did not answer. He was staring at a message painted on a wall in red letters. It was written in the Vethrani language. Someone had taken the time to learn how to write words that no human should have known. The message said, "Welcome to Earth. You will not leave." The explosion killed 30 soldiers before anyone could react. Then the gunfire started. It came from everywhere and nowhere. Humans appeared from windows, from sewers, from rubble piles, fired their weapons, and vanished before the Vethrani could return fire. Varath screamed orders into his communicator. His soldiers fired their advanced weapons at shadows. They hit buildings, streets, abandoned cars. They hit everything except the enemy. When the attack ended 3 minutes later, Varath had lost 200 soldiers. He had not killed a single human. This scene repeated itself across the planet. Every city became a trap. Every forest hid killers. The Vethrani had technology that could destroy mountains, but technology meant nothing when you could not find your target. Humanity had become ghosts that struck from darkness and melted away before dawn. Sergeant Derek Hall was one of those ghosts. He had been a construction worker before the invasion. He had never held a weapon in his life. Now he led a cell of 15 fighters in the Chicago underground. They lived in the old subway tunnels, moving every few days to avoid detection. They ate rats when they could not find anything else. They slept in shifts, always watching, always ready. Derek remembered the day the aliens killed his wife. She had been trying to reach their children's school when the orbital strike hit. He never found her body. There was nothing left to find. That night, he walked to the nearest resistance outpost and asked for a gun. "Ever killed anyone?" The recruiter asked. "Not yet," Derek said. "You will. Can you live with that?" Derek thought about his wife. He thought about his children, hidden somewhere in the mountains with his sister. He thought about the silver ships floating above his world like patient vultures. "I can live with anything," he said, "as long as they die." Now, 6 months into the war, Derek had killed 47 Vethrani soldiers. He knew the exact number because he kept count. Each kill was a payment against a debt that could never be fully repaid. But he would keep trying until his heart stopped beating. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, Captain Laura Vance oversaw the construction of humanity's first true warship. The USS Ironclad was not elegant. It was not beautiful. It was a brutal thing of armor and weapons, designed by engineers who understood one simple truth. In war, survival mattered more than style. The ship had triple redundant systems, armor thick enough to stop small asteroids, and enough firepower to crack a continent. Vance walked through the construction bay, watching thousands of workers assemble the vessel piece by piece. They worked 20-hour shifts. They slept on cots beside their stations. They had not seen sunlight in months. None of them complained. They all knew what they were building and why. "Captain," said her chief engineer, a thin man named Peter Grant who had designed submarines before the war, "we have a problem with the reactor shielding." "Fix it," Vance said. "It will delay completion by 2 weeks. Then we will be 2 weeks late. I will not launch a ship that cannot survive its first battle." Grant nodded and returned to his work. Vance continued her inspection. 3 ships were being built here, hidden from alien sensors by miles of water and rock. 3 ships would not be enough to defeat the Vethrani fleet, but they would be enough to prove something important. Humans could fight back far above Earth. Dr. Megan Ross was learning secrets that would change the war. She had been captured during the initial attack, taken aboard a Vethrani science vessel for study. The aliens wanted to understand human biology. They wanted to know if humans could be useful as slaves or food or something worse. For 3 months, Megan had been examined, tested, and questioned. She had also been watching, and listening, and learning. The Vethrani believed she was just another primitive specimen. They spoke freely around her, never imagining that a human could learn their language. But Megan had a gift for patterns. Within weeks, she understood basic Vethrani. Within 2 months, she was fluent. And what she learned made her heart race with hope. The Vethrani were not invincible. Their bodies were decentralized, with multiple nerve clusters instead of a single brain. This made individual soldiers hard to kill. But their military command structure was fragile. Everything flowed from the High Overseer down through a rigid chain of command. Remove key officers, and entire units became confused and ineffective. Megan recorded everything she learned on a tiny device she had hidden inside her tooth. She waited for her chance to escape. That chance came when a human resistance team attacked the orbital station where she was held. The raid killed 30 Vethrani and freed 12 human prisoners. Megan was among them. She was back on Earth within hours, sitting in front of General Cole, telling him everything she knew. Cole listened in silence. When she finished, he smiled that cold smile that his soldiers had learned to fear. "You have given us a weapon," he said. "Knowledge is a weapon, and now we know where to aim." Across the planet, the war continued. Cities burned. Millions died. The Vethrani grew frustrated and ordered orbital bombardments of population centers. They killed indiscriminately, hoping to break humanity's will through terror. That it did not work. For every human who died, 2 more joined the resistance. For every city destroyed, the survivors became harder, colder, more determined. The Vethrani could not understand it. Every other species had broken under this pressure. Every other species had begged for mercy. Humans did not beg. Humans adapted. Humans remembered every death and added it to a debt that they fully intended to collect. General Cole broadcast a message to the alien fleet. His face appeared on every Vethrani screen, calm and steady and absolutely without fear. "You came to conquer," he said. "You have learned nothing. Every one of ours you kill, we will repay 1,000-fold. This is not a threat. This is a promise. And humans always keep their promises." High Overseer Kelleth watched the message and felt something he had never experienced before. It took him a long moment to identify the emotion. It was doubt. 1 year into the war, the USS Ironclad launched from its hidden bay and rose toward the stars. 2 sister ships followed. They were ugly, brutal machines crewed by humans who had nothing left to lose. The long night was ending. Dawn was coming. and with it would come fire. The Vethrani had wanted a conquest. What they got was the beginning of their end. Captain Laura Vance stood on the bridge of the USS Ironclad and watched the stars through armored glass. Behind her, 200 crew members worked in focused silence. They had trained for this moment for 18 months. They had dreamed of it. Some of them had prayed for it. Today, humanity would strike back. The target was a Vethrani supply depot in the asteroid belt, 3 days from Earth at maximum speed. The depot fed fuel and weapons to the occupation forces on the planet. Destroying it would not win the war, but it would prove something that the Vethrani had never believed possible. Humans could fight in space. "All stations report ready," said Commander Tony Blake, a second-in-command. He was a former naval officer who had commanded submarines before the invasion. Now he commanded something that no human had ever commanded before. "Take us out," Vance said. The Ironclad moved through the darkness like a shadow. Its engines burned at minimum power to avoid detection. Its hull was coated with materials that absorbed sensor signals. The Vethrani were looking for enemies on Earth. They never imagined that humans had already reached the stars. The journey took 3 days. 3 days of silence, tension, and careful navigation through fields of rock and ice. 3 days for the crew to think about what they were about to do and what it might cost them. On the 4th day, they found the depot. It was larger than Vance had expected. 6 massive structures floated among the asteroids, connected by tubes of glowing energy. A dozen Vethrani warships patrolled the perimeter, their silver hulls gleaming against the black void. The enemy had grown comfortable here. They had grown careless. "Enemy count confirmed," Blake said. 12 combat vessels. 6 cargo transports. Defense platforms at each structure. Vance studied the tactical display. The odds were terrible. 1 human ship against 12 alien warships and fixed defenses. Any reasonable commander would have turned back. Laura Vance was not a reasonable commander. She was a woman who had watched her family burn when the aliens hit San Diego. She was a woman who had spent 18 months building a weapon and training a crew to use it. She was a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. "Signal the crew," she said. "General quarters. All weapons armed. Prepare for combat." Alarms rang through the ship. Crew members ran to their stations. Weapons powered up with a low hum that Vance could feel in her bones. The Ironclad was ready. "Attack pattern Delta," Vance ordered. "Target the nearest cruiser. Fire everything." The Ironclad exploded from the asteroid field like a beast from a cave. Its weapons fired in a continuous storm of destruction. Missiles, energy beams, and kinetic rounds tore through the void toward the enemy. The Vethrani never saw it coming. The first cruiser died before it could raise shields. The second managed to turn toward the threat before a volley of missiles turned it into expanding gas. The remaining ships scrambled to respond, their elegant formations breaking apart in confusion. "They are returning fire," Blake reported, his voice calm despite the chaos on his screens. "Multiple contacts. Brace for impact." The first Vethrani beam hit the Ironclad's forward armor. The ship shuddered, but did not slow. The armor held. Another beam hit. Then another. Still, the Ironclad advanced, firing constantly, refusing to stop. This was what the aliens could not understand. Their ships were designed for efficiency. When damaged, they retreated to repair. When outmatched, they withdrew to fight another day. It was logical. It was sensible. Human ships were not designed for logic. They were designed to win or die trying. "Hull breach on Deck 7, someone shouted. "Damage control responding. Maintain attack pattern," Vance ordered. "Continue firing." A Vethrani destroyer moved to intercept them. It was twice the size of the Ironclad, bristling with weapons. Its commander thought he was about to destroy this strange, ugly human ship. "Ramming speed," Vance said quietly. Blake turned to look at her. His face showed no surprise. They had discussed this possibility before the mission. Some battles could only be won one way. "Ramming speed, he said. The ironclad accelerated directly toward the destroyer. Its weapons continued firing, even as enemy beams tore through its armor. Crew members died at their stations and were replaced by others who knew they would die too. No one ran. No one hesitated. The collision was spectacular. The ironclad's reinforced bow punched through the destroyer's hull like a fist through glass. At the same moment, every weapon on the human ship fired into the enemy vessel's interior. The destroyer exploded. The ironclad tumbled away from the blast, broken but somehow still alive. "Damage report," Vance said. Blood ran down her face from a cut on her forehead. She did not notice. "We have lost 60% of our weapons. Engines at 40%. Life support failing on decks 3 through 9. Casualties." Blake paused. "Casualties are heavy. Can we still fight?" "Yes, Captain." "Then we continue." The battle lasted another 2 hours. When it ended, the Vethrani supply depot was gone. All 6 structures destroyed. 8 enemy warships reduced to debris. The remaining 4 had fled, carrying word of what they had witnessed. The ironclad limped home with 17 surviving crew out of 200. Every survivor was wounded. The ship itself would need months of repair. By any military measure, it was a Pyrrhic victory, but to humanity, it was everything high. Overseer Kelleth watched the combat footage in his private chambers. He had watched it 17 times. Each time, he hoped to understand what he was seeing. Each time, he failed. The human ship had taken damage that should have destroyed it. Its crew had continued fighting while their vessel died around them. They had thrown their ship at his destroyer like a weapon. Who did such things? What kind of species valued victory over survival? "Overseer," said his aide, entering the chamber with hesitation. "There is news from the conquered territories. Report. The Valori system is in rebellion. The Korath worlds have stopped sending tribute. We are receiving reports of attacks on supply convoys across 7 sectors. All attacks follow a similar pattern. Strike and disappear. No direct engagement." Kelleth closed his eyes. He knew what this meant. The humans had contacted the species that the Dominion had conquered. They had shared their tactics. They had spread their defiance like a disease. "And there is more," the aide continued. "Our intelligence division has confirmed that the humans are building a fleet. Not 3 ships, dozens. They have established construction facilities on the moons of their largest planet. Our sensors cannot penetrate the interference in that region." "How?" Kelleth demanded. "How are they doing this?" "We control their planet. We destroy their cities. They should be broken." The aide did not answer. He had no answer to give. On Earth, the war continued. But something had changed. The resistance fighters who had once hidden in shadows now stood taller. They had heard about the ironclad. They had heard how their brothers and sisters had fought among the stars. They knew that humanity was no longer just surviving. Humanity was fighting back. General Cole received Admiral Vance at a secret command post beneath the ruins of Denver. She was thinner than before. Her eyes carried shadows that would never fade. But her voice was strong. "It worked," she said. "They are afraid now. I saw it in the way they fought. They expected us to run. When we did not, they did not know what to do." Cole nodded slowly. "The other species are rising. Our alliance is growing. The Vethrani are stretched across 300 worlds, and now those worlds are pushing back. What comes next?" Cole walked to a map that showed not just Earth, but the entire region of space controlled by the Dominion. Red dots marked Vethrani strongholds. Blue dots marked the growing human fleet. Green dots marked allied species who had joined the fight. "They came to our home," Cole said. "They thought they could take everything from us, and we would simply accept it. Now we take the war to them. Not defense, attack. We hit their supply lines, their command structures, their homeworlds. We make them feel what we felt." Vance looked at the map. So many targets. So many battles still to fight. So many people who would die before this ended. Can we win? She asked. Cole smiled. It was the same cold smile he had shown in that bunker 3 years ago, when humanity's leaders had been ready to surrender. "We have already won," he said. "They just do not know it yet. Every day they spend fighting us is a day their empire weakens. Every ship they lose to human guns is a ship that cannot control another world. We do not need to destroy them all at once. We just need to keep fighting until they break. And if they do not break, they will. Every empire falls eventually. The Vethrani have ruled through fear for 2,000 years. But fear only works until someone stops being afraid. And humanity stopped being afraid the moment they burned our sky. Outside, the stars were hidden by clouds of smoke from the distant fires of war. But somewhere beyond those clouds, a fleet was growing. Ships with human crews and human weapons and human determination. The hunters had become the hunted. The war was far from over. But for the first time since that terrible first day, humanity was no longer prey. They were predators. And they were hungry. 3 years of war had changed everything. Earth was scarred. 2 billion humans had died from orbital bombardments, ground battles, starvation, and disease. Cities that had stood for centuries were now ruins. Rivers ran through valleys of ash. Children grew up knowing nothing but the sound of explosions and the sight of silver ships in the sky. But humanity had not broken. Humanity had transformed. Admiral Laura Vance stood on the bridge of the USS Vengeance, flagship of a fleet that should not have existed. 40 warships floated in formation around her, each one crewed by soldiers who had known nothing but fighting since childhood. They had trained in hidden bases on Jupiter's moons. They had learned to hate and to kill with a focus that no other species could match. Today, they would use those skills. "All ships report ready," said Commander Tony Blake, still serving at her side after 3 years of war. He had aged a decade in that time. They all had. "Set course for Vethrani Prime," Vance ordered. "Maximum speed. It is time to bring the war home." The fleet moved as one. 40 ships pointed their bows toward the heart of the enemy empire and began to burn. The counteroffensive had begun. Far across the galaxy, High Overseer Keleth received the news with disbelief. Humans were attacking his home world, not defending their own ruined planet, attacking the species that had been marked for extinction 3 years ago was now threatening. The capital of an empire that had stood for 2,000 years. "Recall all available forces," he ordered. "Every ship we have must defend the prime world." His advisors hesitated. "Overseer, if we pull ships from the conquered territories, the rebellions will intensify. We have already lost control of 40 systems. I do not care about 40 systems. I care about stopping these humans before they reach our cities. They are animals, savages. They cannot be allowed to touch our sacred ground." The orders went out. Ships that had been suppressing rebellions across the Dominion turned and raced toward home. And behind them, the species they had oppressed for centuries finally rose up in full revolt. Colonel Marcus Webb coordinated the intelligence that made this possible. He had not slept in 2 days. His command center on Europa was filled with communication screens showing data from 8 star systems. The alliance of formerly conquered species was larger than anyone had expected. 12 worlds now openly fought the Dominion. 20 more provided resources and shelter in secret. The Koreth fleet has engaged Vethrani forces near the supply hub, reported one of his officers. They are holding. Valori ground forces have captured the orbital defense stations, reported another. The system is ours. Marcus nodded, adding the information to his strategic map. General Cole's plan was working. By striking at the Vethrani homeworld, they had forced the enemy to choose between holding their empire and protecting their heart. The Vethrani had chosen their heart, and their empire was crumbling around them. Send word to all allied forces, Marcus ordered. Phase 2 begins now. Every system that can rise should rise. The Dominion cannot fight everywhere at once. The message went out across the stars. And species that had been slaves for centuries answered with fire and fury. On the ground of Vethrani Prime, a world that had never known war, humans walked through streets of crystal and light. Sergeant Derek Hall led his squad through the alien city with cold efficiency. The buildings were beautiful in a way that made him angry. The Vethrani had built paradise while burning other worlds to ash. They had lived in peace while his wife died in nuclear fire. They had raised their children in safety while human children starved in ruins. Now their paradise was burning, and Derek felt nothing but satisfaction. Contact left, called one of his soldiers. A group of Vethrani civilians huddled behind a fallen pillar, their eyes wide with terror. They had never seen humans before. They had never seen war before. Derek looked at them for a long moment. He remembered the broadcasts he had seen, the Vethrani soldiers laughing as they killed prisoners. He remembered the stories of torture, of experimentation, of casual cruelty inflicted on those who could not fight back. He raised his weapon, then he lowered it. "Leave them," he said. "They are not soldiers. We are here for their leaders, not their children." His squad moved on. Behind them, the Vethrani civilians stared in confusion. They had been taught that humans were savages who killed without mercy. They could not understand why the savages had spared them. High above the planet, the final battle was beginning. Admiral Vance's fleet had been met by everything the Dominion could gather. Over 200 Vethrani warships formed a defensive wall between the human fleet and the sacred homeworld. The odds were 5-1 against humanity. Any rational calculation said they could not win. Vance gave her orders anyway. All ships, attack formation. Target their command vessels. Ignore the rest. We do not need to destroy their fleet. We need to break their leadership. The human ships surged forward into the wall of enemy fire. Shields flared and failed. Armor melted under concentrated beams. Ships died in flashes of light that lit up the void, but they did not stop. They never stopped. Vance watched the tactical display as her fleet punched through the enemy formation like a blade through flesh. 13 human ships were lost in the first hour, 8 more in the second. But the Vethrani command vessels were falling too, one after another. Their precise formations dissolving into chaos as officers died, and no one knew who should give orders. "Admiral," Blake reported, "we have located High Overseer Keleth's flagship. It is trying to retreat." "No retreat," Vance said. "All remaining ships converge on that target. Disable it. I want him alive." 9 human warships broke off from the main battle and chased the fleeing flagship. They caught it at the edge of the system, their weapons tearing away its engines and shields until it drifted helpless in the void. Colonel Webb led the boarding party personally. The corridors of the enemy flagship were dark and filled with smoke. Vethrani soldiers fought desperately to stop the humans, but they were disorganized and afraid. Their command structure had collapsed. They did not know what to do without orders from above. The humans knew exactly what to do. Webb's team moved through the ship. with brutal efficiency. They had trained for this for years. They had dreamed about it during long nights in hidden bases. Every step brought them closer to the bridge where the architect of Earth's suffering waited. They found High Overseer Keleth standing alone in the center of his command chamber. His officers were dead or fled. His guards had been killed at the doors. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the humans enter with eyes that showed no fear. "So," he said, speaking in flawless English, "the primitives have won. I suppose you will kill me now." Webb walked toward him slowly. His weapon was pointed at the alien's chest. His finger rested on the trigger. It would be so easy. One shot, and the creature who had ordered the death of billions would be gone forever. "Before I die," Keleth continued, "I must understand something. Why? Why did you fight like this? You could not have known you would win. By every calculation, you should have surrendered. Every other species did. What made you different?" A hologram flickered to life beside Webb. The face of General Daniel Cole appeared, calm and steady as always. "You want to know why?" Cole said. "I will tell you. We knew we might lose. We knew from the first day that our chances were small. But we also knew that surrender meant the end of everything we were. Not just our lives, our identity, our freedom, our souls." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You have conquered 300 worlds because those species made a calculation. They weighed survival against freedom and chose survival. Humans did not make that calculation. We would rather die standing than live kneeling. That is what you never understood. That is why you lost." Keleth stared at the hologram for a long moment. Then he laughed softly. "You are mad. Your entire species is mad." "Perhaps," Cole admitted. "But we are mad in a way that wins wars. And now your war is over." Webb stepped forward and bound the High Overseer's hands. The alien who had ruled an empire now stood as a prisoner of the species he had tried to exterminate. The battle above Vethrani Prime ended 3 hours later. The Dominion fleet was scattered or destroyed. The sacred homeworld was occupied by human forces who treated civilians with more mercy than anyone had expected. The news spread across the galaxy. The Vethrani Dominion, undefeated for 2,000 years, had fallen. An empire that had crushed hundreds of species had been broken by one. On Earth, in the ruins of cities that were still burning, humans looked up at the sky and knew that they had won. High Overseer Keleth was tried for his crimes against humanity and a dozen other species. The trial lasted 3 days. The evidence filled thousands of files. When it ended, there was only one possible verdict. They executed him at dawn, in a square that had once been the center of his power. Humans and freed aliens watched together as the architect of countless genocides paid for his choices. General Cole did not attend the execution. He stayed on Earth, in the command bunker, where he had spent 3 years directing a war that should have been impossible to win. He had kept his promise. What followed had been humanity's reckoning. Now came the harder part, deciding what to do with victory. 10 years had passed since the first alien ships appeared above Earth. The galaxy was a different place now. The Vethrani Dominion was gone, collapsed into fragments that would never threaten anyone again. 300 worlds that had been conquered and enslaved were free. New nations rose among the stars, built by species that had forgotten what freedom tasted like until humans reminded them. And humanity stood at the center of it all. The first Galactic Council met on a station orbiting Earth. Representatives from 40 species gathered in a chamber built from the wreckage of Vethrani warships. They came with fear in their hearts. They had seen what humans could do in war. Now they waited to learn what humans would do in peace. General Daniel Cole walked to the podium slowly. He was an old man now, his hair white, his body bent by decades of carrying impossible weight. He had not wanted to give this speech. He had wanted to retire to some quiet place and forget everything he had done. But the other leaders had insisted. They said that his words had started the war. His words should end it. He looked out at the assembly. He saw Chorus dignitaries with their scaled faces. He saw Valori observers with their forearms crossed in attention. He saw a dozen other species whose names he was still learning. And he saw fear in every single face. They were afraid of humanity, and he could not blame them. "You are afraid of us," he said. His voice was quiet, but the chamber was silent, and every word carried. "I understand. We showed you what we are capable of when we fight to survive. We broke an empire that had stood for 2,000 years. We did things that will haunt us for generations." He paused. No one moved. "But we did not start this war. They came to our home. They killed our children. They gave us no choice but to become what we became. We did what we had to do, not what we wanted to do." His eyes moved across the assembly, meeting as many gazes as he could. "So here is what follows. We will not become what they were. We will not conquer. We will not enslave. We will build. We will protect. Every species that was under the Dominion's heel is free now. Not because we are merciful, but because we remember what it felt like to be hunted. We remember what it felt like to have no one willing to help us." He straightened his back despite the pain it caused. "Humanity offers you alliance. True alliance. We will share our technology and our resources. We will defend you against any threat. We will ask only for peace and cooperation in return. This is not charity. This is not weakness. This is a choice. We choose to be better than those who attacked us." One of the delegates spoke up. "And if we refuse? If we do not want humanity's protection?" Cole smiled slightly. "Then you are free to go your own way. We will not force anyone to join us. That is what the Dominion did. We are not the Dominion." Another delegate asked a question that everyone was thinking. "But if another power threatens humanity, if another species attacks your worlds, what then?" Cole's smile faded. His eyes grew hard. "Then we will do what we did before. We will fight with everything we have. We will never stop, never surrender, never accept defeat. Any power that thinks humanity is weak for choosing peace should remember what we did when we chose war." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the Korath delegate began to tap her claws against her table. It was their species' sign of approval. The sound spread. Other delegates joined in with their own gestures of agreement. Within a minute, the entire assembly was showing their acceptance in a dozen different ways. General Cole nodded once, then turned and walked away from the podium. He had said what needed to be said. Now others would build the future he had fought to make possible. Admiral Lavra Vance took command of Earth's defense fleet. 120 warships patrolled human space, a force so powerful that no species dared to threaten them. She spent most of her time in her quarters, reading reports and avoiding conversations about the war. She had killed more beings than she could count. She had lost more friends than she wanted to remember. All she wanted now was peace. "Admiral," her aide said one morning, "there is a transmission from the Korath homeworld. They are asking for assistance. A rogue Vethrani remnant fleet is threatening their outer colonies." Vance closed her eyes. She wanted to say no. She wanted to let someone else handle it. She was so tired of fighting, but she thought about what Cole had said. Humanity had promised to protect. Humanity had promised to be better. "Prepare the fleet," she ordered. "We will help them." The rogue fleet was scattered within 3 days. Not one Korath citizen died. Vance returned home and found a message waiting from the Korath government. It contained only 2 words: "Thank you." She filed the message away and started preparing for the next mission. Rest could wait. There was still work to do. Colonel Marcus Webb became humanity's first ambassador to the Galactic Council. He traded his uniform for diplomatic robes and spent his days building bridges between species that had never trusted each other. It was slower than war, more frustrating, less clear, but he found that he was good at it. The Valori want to establish a trade agreement, his assistant reported one afternoon. They are offering medical technology in exchange for human agricultural methods. Accept it, Marcus said, and invite their diplomats to Earth. Let them see our cities. Let them see how we are rebuilding. They might be spying on us. Marcus smiled. Good. Let them spy. Let them see that we are not building weapons or planning conquests. Let them see children playing in rebuilt parks. That will do more to earn their trust than any treaty. The Valori delegation arrived 3 months later. They saw human cities rising from ruins. They saw gardens growing where bombs had fallen. They saw a species that had every reason to hate the galaxy, choosing hope instead of vengeance. They went home and told their people what they had witnessed. The alliance grew stronger. Dr. Megan Ross established the Institute of Xenobiology in what had once been San Diego. She gathered scientists from a dozen worlds and began the work of understanding the galaxy's incredible diversity of life. Not for exploitation, not for warfare, for knowledge itself. We spent so long learning how to kill them, she told her students on the first day of classes. Now we learn how to understand them. That is how civilizations survive. Not through war, but through wisdom. Her students were human and alien in equal measure. They worked side by side, studying samples and sharing theories. The walls of the Institute were covered with images of the galaxy's wonders, a reminder of everything worth protecting. Derek Hall went home. The war had taken everything from him. His wife, his innocence, years of his life that he would never get back. He had killed enemies without mercy and watched friends die in his arms. He had walked through alien cities as a conqueror and wondered if he had become the monster he was fighting. But now he stood in the ruins of Chicago, watching construction crews rebuild the street where he had lived. His children were there, grown now, strangers who looked at him with uncertain eyes. He did not know how to talk to them. He did not know how to be a father instead of a soldier. "Dad?" His daughter said. "Are you okay?" Derek looked at the rising buildings. He looked at the children playing in a park that had been a battlefield. He looked at the blue sky that had once rained fire. "I think I will be," he said. Eventually, it was not a lie. He had survived the worst thing imaginable. He could survive peace too. It would just take time. General Daniel Cole retired to a small house on the coast of Maine. He spent his days walking on the beach, watching the waves and trying not to think about the past. It did not always work. Some nights he woke up screaming, haunted by the faces of everyone who had died under his command. But the nightmares came less often as the years passed. He received messages sometimes from soldiers who had served under him, from aliens who had been freed because of the war he fought, from leaders who wanted his advice on problems they could not solve. He answered them when he could. He ignored them when he could not. He had given everything he had to humanity's survival. Now he wanted nothing but quiet. One evening, as the sun set over the Atlantic, he received a message from a young Vithrani scholar. The alien had been born after the war. He knew nothing of conquest except what he had read in history files. His message contained a single question. Why did humanity fight when victory was so uncertain? Cole sat on his porch and considered the question for a long time. Then he wrote his reply. We fought because surrender was worse than death. We fought because we would rather be destroyed than enslaved. We fought because that is who we are. You cannot calculate the will to be free. You cannot measure the love of home. You can only understand it when you face an enemy who possesses it. Your ancestors learned that lesson. Make sure your descendants never forget it. He sent the message and returned to watching the waves. The young Vethrani scholar read the reply and added it to his research. Years later, he published a study that became required reading across the galaxy. Its conclusion was simple. We believed conquest was a transaction, the strong taking from the weak. Humanity taught us that some species do not calculate cost and benefit. They simply refuse to lose. Against such an enemy, victory was never possible. They hit Earth first. What followed was inevitable. The galaxy remembered. Humanity built and explored and reached out to the stars with open hands instead of weapons.